Welcome to Born on the Bayou Sports, a Houston sports show made for Houstonians by Houstonians. Join Tim Costello and Scott Barzilla every week as they break down the latest in Houston Astros, Rockets, and Texans news. Tim's a former minor league broadcaster, and Scott has written 2 books on the Baseball Hall of Fame. Yeah, if Javier could get it figured out, it would make things a lot easier because he was that guy everybody was counting on this year to be a Cy Young candidate, take that big step forward and help anchor this rotation with Fromber.
Since he's come to Houston, you can look at the development of guys like Carlos Correa defensively, Jeremy Pena defensively. I mean, you can Alex Bregman's, certainly I think a better than average third baseman.
And now you're putting teams in 3rd and 8, 3rd and 7, 3rd and 9. Now here comes Will Anderson. Pin back your ears, let's go. So if you're Bayou born and bred, or just like spending time in the H, sit down, relax, and stay Houston strong. Welcome back in another episode here of Born on the Bayou Sports. Tim Costello, Scott Barzilla coming to you joyously after what was a wonderful, beautiful, perfectly executed wild card weekend of playoff football, Scott.
Not only that, but I can't think of a single game that turned out badly for me in any of the sports. And that includes college sports, which I know you're not going to feel the same way.
Yeah, as a UH fan, we're not exactly playing our best basketball right now, but that's okay. I'm focusing on the pro teams in town. As a Houstonian, we got the win. As a Houstonian living in Dallas, the Cowboys lost, so that's always good. Some upsets, I feel like. Some teams that I feel like are going to be firing their coaches, even though they made the playoffs because of how they played in the playoffs. You had Jared Goff, out-dueling his former Lion counterpart and Matthew Stafford, going against a team that swapped quarterbacks, gave away Jared Goff because they didn't think he could get the job done. Well, he went and got the job done against them. You had freezing cold temperatures. You had a game moved because of snow. I mean, it was an eventful, fun wild card weekend.
Yeah, we should probably start with the game that's going to be the most important one to y'all folks. And I'm going to eat some crow. I did pick the Browns in advance of this game. We have the receipts if y'all want to go back and listen to the inaugural episode. Tim did pick your Texans, so feather of the cap there. He's wearing his D'Amico Ryans jersey there if y'all want to follow along on camera. But yeah, that was an absolutely terrific effort. And I don't know, were you ever nervous in that watching that game?
In the first quarter, yes, because it went back and forth, right? The thing that really made me nervous was the first drive of the game that the Texans had the football and they get down to the goal line and they were unable to punch it in and they had to settle for 3, right? And immediately I'm thinking of I guess it was that 2012 Patriots playoff game where you get the opening kickoff, take it down to like the 5 or 6, then you end up settling for 3, and then it was ball game over from there. Or it might not even a playoff game. It was the night that they wore the Letterman jackets up to New England, right? But that to me seemed like, same old Texans. Here we go in the playoffs, unable to punch it in. But then the defense just showed up. Stroud looked fantastic. Even his incompletions, for the most part, were drop balls. And then things just started to flow our way, especially after the first pick 6. I started to maybe feel like some of that Flacco magic was going to run out.
Of all people, Colin Cowherd produced a stat that I did not know. Everybody in America who follows NFL football knows that the Kansas City Chiefs lead the planet in drop passes. I mean, that's been the storyline all year. But he produced a stat, did not know this. Your Houston Texans are number 2. And I don't know if you knew that either. That we saw that Dalton Schultz drop there in the first half, and I was just like, oh, geez. And you saw that, misconnection with Nico Collins in the end zone where he was all by himself. And, who knows who to blame that on. Some people say that he kind of slowed down, slowed his route down. Some people say like Stroud overthrew him. Who knows? But my goodness, two quarterbacks over wildcard weekend had a perfect passer rating, and C.J. Stroud was one of them. I mean, he could have thrown for 400 yards plus if he had needed to, and he didn't need to. And that was, the best part of that day.
And I think what was really intriguing to me too, Scott, is the Texans played complete football. I thought the special teams was good. The defense was fantastic. And obviously the offense played complementary football. When you had to throw it early, you did. And then once you had the lead, the team kind of grounded out a little bit there towards the end. And Singletary's been a nice back for the club. Pierce had one or two carries and they were not great. This is Singletary's horse to ride, I think, going forward. But it's a team playing good complementary football in the playoffs, and that's what you want to see. Especially knowing that we're going to have to face the number one overall seed in the quote-unquote tournament, right? If we want to get to our first ever AFC championship game. You don't want to get into a shootout with Baltimore, right? Like, although I do think this will be a fairly high-scoring game, I don't want to play a 42-38 football game with the Baltimore Ravens. I really don't, because they have so many more horses than we do. At some point, you kind of start comparing this team to the Texans of old, right? At least from a personnel standpoint. We got one good wide receiver. We got a tight end who can catch the ball. And we don't have the running back like Arian Foster, but we've got a back that they're relying heavily on. And that was the formula, and eventually that formula ran out if you had to score a lot of points. Now, we definitely have a better quarterback than we ever did in the Gary Kubiak or Bill O'Brien days. But at the same time, this is not a game where I want to get into a foot race or a boat race. I want to see this defense keep Lamar Jackson contained and make him have a really, really painful, tough day out there.
Okay, so game balls. We did this last week. I don't know if you would like me to lead off or if you'd like to lead off.
Oh, you can go ahead, absolutely.
All right, so I'm going to go to a non-player for my game ball. And I'm going to go to the guy whose jersey you're wearing, and I'm going to go with D'Amico Ryans. He is getting my game ball. And here's a stat that I'll throw it at you. Out of the first 42 snaps of the game, when the game was still in doubt, Derek Stingley was on Amari Cooper 35 of the 42 first snaps of the game until we started throwing in backups. Amari Cooper was targeted 3 times. He had 1 catch for -6 yards on those 35 snaps. Now, we all know what happened the last time Amari Cooper faced off against the Browns. That was when, the family was taking its trip to Baton Rouge, and we listened to all 250 yards plus of his performance. So I'm giving a game ball to D'Amico Ryans because he saw what he did wrong last time. So many coaches are so bullheaded that they're just, this is the way we do things, and we're just going to keep doing it that way. Where he said, you know what, I screwed up last time. I'm going to put my best corner on their best receiver, and we're going to shut that guy down. And Derek Stingley shut that guy down. And that's why I have a little bit of faith coming into this Saturday, because I think I'm looking at D'Amico Ryans, and I'm looking at the fact that he's got the acumen to find something that will shut down at least one of those targets that Baltimore has. I don't think he can shut down all of them, and particularly if Mark Andrews is healthy. They got different options in that offense, but he's gonna find one guy and he's gonna shut that guy down, and that gives the Texans a fighting chance.
Yeah, and I think what scares me a little bit down the line with Baltimore is even if they do find a way to get Andrews to play, which I don't think it's looking like that, but likely the guy who's filled in for Andrews has been spectacular. So now you've got a young tight end who has got playing time because the veteran tight end has been injured. Now you've got 2 really good tight ends. That for that type of offense, 2 guys who can control the middle of the field, plus Zay Flowers, plus Beckham, who started to flourish late in the season. And then Perriman too is still over. I mean, they've got some receivers. I'm sorry, Bateman, not Perriman. Bateman is over there. They've got some speed on the field there in Baltimore. But I agree with you. Great call on D'Amico. I think he is a well-deserved game ball. I am actually going to go. I'm going to go with it's easy. It's obvious. I'm going to go with the kid. I'm going to go with C.J. Stroud, right? Your first opportunity to be in a playoff game in the NFL. It's a completely different atmosphere. You're hosting it. You've got the home crowd there. You are a rookie, and you didn't miss a beat. There was not a moment in that game where the light was too bright for C.J. Stroud. He came out the first time he touched the football and drove it right down the field. When he didn't get the touchdown, he got the big, long touchdown the next drive down the field. I mean, C.J. Stroud, to have that performance in your first ever playoff game, I mean, I feel like it's an obvious choice sometimes, but man, like the legend is growing, right, Scott? This is a guy that we just keep forgetting he's a rookie. Other than the fact that he keep being mentioned, he's Rookie of the Year candidate. When you watch this guy play, you don't think that this is a rookie in the NFL. This is a guy who's poised, who was ready for the big time, and he met the moment. He stepped up to the moment. He took his opportunity.
You really got to feel good about the Texans' top 3 draft picks over the last 2 years. I mean, I mentioned Derek Stingley, just before. Will Anderson had himself. He did not have, the numbers that jump off the page. He, certainly, I think they had one play where it's like, can you have 3 guys get half a sack? Can you give a third of a sack? I don't know how that works, but, he was getting constant pressure. So you have 3 guys, Derek Stingley, Will Anderson, and C.J. Stroud. You mentioned all 3 top 5 overall picks, all 3 playing like it. And that's, your team, when you have teams that are this good, you have to have your star players play like stars. And that's, that's what's happened. I know we have plenty in wild card weekend to get to, but I want to stay on this Texans train a little longer. So we have the key matchup on Saturday. So, we can run through the 4 games, and then we can get back to the long conversations that move us away from H-Town. How do you see this Baltimore game going?
I think there's 2 paths I think it can go down. I think a little bit of it's weather dependent, right? I think this very well could be a try and run the ball, grind it out, play action, let your defense, keep everything in front of them, 21-18 kind of football game. But then if we've got decent conditions, I could see this being one of those classic NFL playoff games where, no team really lost, someone else won it, and it came down to whoever had the football last. And you just hope it's you. I really do think it's going to be a tight game, Scott. I think Vegas has this one wrong right now. Vegas has it as of Tuesday night here, where it's a 9.5-point game. I think they're wrong. I really do. And I know Baltimore's good. I know Lamar Jackson is probably going to win the MVP of the league this year. He's definitely the best quarterback in the league this year. I still think, if you go back and you look at that first game of the season, the Texans played them well. At least for like 3 quarters of that game, they played them well. And that was with the governor on C.J. Stroud, right? Like they really didn't let him do much. They ran Pierce up the middle all freaking game. It was really not the same Texans team that we're seeing right now. So I think it's going to be close. I think it's going to be a little bit weather dependent, but I do think it's a one score game, and it's either going to be 21-18 going down for a field goal late at the game, or just whoever gets the ball last at like a 42-39 or 42-35, something like that.
So a couple of numbers to throw it at you, because I'm the numbers guy. First of all, Devin Singletary, since he's taken over as the starter, is in the top 5 in the NFL in rushing. This is an entirely different rushing attack than it was in week 1. You pointed out Dameon Pierce being sent up the middle, and just, and that's been the whole season for Dameon Pierce. He's averaged maybe a little over 3 yards a carry, if that. And Singletary, while he's not going to make anybody forget Walter Payton or Barry Sanders or Jim Brown or anybody like that, if he had been the starter from day one, would be 1,000-yard plus back. I mean, that's pretty clear. And then number 2, you mentioned the governor. That's on C.J. Stroud. I'm with you. 9.5 points is ridiculous. I mean, that is a ridiculous line. And then the second stat I was going to throw at you is that C.J. Stroud now has the same number of playoff victories as Lamar Jackson in their pro careers. Lamar Jackson is 1-3, has never made it past the divisional round, is 0-2 at home. Now, he's got a different offensive coordinator, running a different offense. He's got more talent at wide receiver than he probably ever has. However, narratives matter, and we saw that on Wild Card Weekend. And we'll get to that when we get to the rest of the Wild Card games. But, the same familiar stories that you have about certain franchises matter. And Lamar Jackson is a guy that has not performed well in the playoffs. So I'm definitely picking Houston to cover. I think it's going to be a really tight game. And then it could come down to which quarterback makes the big mistake in this game. We haven't seen C.J. Stroud make too many mistakes. In fact, if you throw out the Bengals game, I don't know. I mean, he's got, 2 interceptions other than that game? I mean, so who do you trust more with the game on the line, the ball in his hands? Do you trust C.J. Stroud or do you trust Lamar Jackson?
No, I definitely think if the game's on the line, I trust CJ to go get us the win, right? I have no doubt in my mind if CJ has the ball with 2 minutes left and the Texans have a chance to win, they're going to win the game. That's no question about that. I think Lamar Jackson was also a product of a bit of a bad system, right? I think as many prominent actors get typecast in a certain type of roles, right? There's a reason. What's his name? Alexander, the character who played George from Seinfeld. There's a reason he's not in many roles, right? Because he could only see him as George. Well, many offensive coordinators could only see Lamar Jackson as the scrambler. They could only see him as a guy who, we have to find a way to get 1,000 yards rushing out of him on top of what he's going to do through the air. And they ran that guy into the ground. Much the same way that Hurts in Philadelphia has been just run into the ground. You got 1,000-yard running back, but for some reason your quarterback's rushing for 15 touchdowns. Guys get beat the hell up, especially when he made a deep playoff run last year. You were running him into the ground again this year, and we can talk about that game later, but this is a little bit more of a refreshed Lamar Jackson, Scott. I feel like he's going to have much more fresh legs because he had just way less called runs. He's going to get his on the ground. It's going to happen. He's a creative, free-flowing guy who's going to see his hole and take off when it's there, but they're not calling the design quarterback runs that they were when Roman was the offensive coordinator there. They've got a nice flow on offense that I think allows Lamar Jackson to be his best self. And I think he's going to play a good game. And I would love to eat crow on this, would absolutely love to come in and say, we picked off Lamar Jackson 6 times and took 5 to the house. That'd be great. But at the end of the day, I think it's going to be a quarterback battle. And I just hope, like I said, that we have the ball last.
Right. And I think if you look in terms of this game, in terms of players that are likely to miss, Baltimore on their side, I can't remember that kid's name, their rookie tailback that averaged 9+ yards a carry. He ended up going down one of the last weeks of the year. If they had him, I think it would have been lights out. I mean, it would have. And then defensively, for the Texans, they had Jimmy Ward healthy. I mean, that would have just completely change, the landscape of the secondary, because I think, Nelson has shown that he can get beat one-on-one. He's shown that he can make some plays one-on-one. And so Nelson's a guy that, you're not really quite sure what you're going to get. Stingley's a guy I think you shut down. And I think if we're not going to get anything out of D'Amico Ryans this week, but probably he shuts down Zay Flowers. I think that's probably the play with Derek Stingley. And then you just hope that Odell Beckham doesn't beat you. You put Nelson on Beckham. And then you put a safety on Andrews or Lively. and you just kind of cross your fingers and you hope that they don't beat you. That's the problem when you're in the final 8 teams, is that you're facing off against competition, whoever you play. If we were to advance to the AFC Championship game against Buffalo or Kansas City, they got guys that are just going to eat you alive, and you can maybe take away one, and then you just kind of have to keep your fingers crossed. And that's going to be the way with this game. And I don't think you're going to see 2 pick or 3 pick sixes. That's just stupid. That doesn't happen very often. You don't have any Joe Flacco's left. So I think one of these quarterbacks makes one key error in this game, and that's what decides this game.
I think you're absolutely right. I think the you can make the playoffs with a below average quarterback in the NFL. We've seen it time and time again, right? You've got weak divisions. You've got teams with great defenses like the Browns who could overcome a ton of quarterback injuries, or the Pittsburgh Steelers who were able to squeak in, or even last year you had Seattle get in with Geno Smith, pardon me. Geno Smith's not an elite guy, right? And you typically get bounced in the first round when that happens, Scott. If you don't have a quarterback who can go in there and make plays, you're going to get bounced. And sometimes it's matchup dependent, right? You see Baker Mayfield sneaks through because they drew just a defeated Eagles team. But for the most part, when you look through, the first round of the playoff matchups, the team with the better quarterback tends to win. That's where we're at now at this point. Which quarterback is going to guide you through to victory, right? And you never want to just simplify it down to that. But at the end of the day, when you've got theoretically, the best 8 teams in football, we're talking slim margins here, right? Every team got to be good in their own way and have their own culture and their own way of doing things as far as offensive and defensive game planning. But you've got pretty slim margins that separate, team 3 from team 4, team 5 from team 6. But when you look at the matchups, and typically in the playoffs, it's a quarterback that got hot, or a guy who's just the best quarterback in the league goes out and wins it. And right now, at least the Texans to say they have a hot quarterback, right? And so that's the one thing you could really lead on is we've got a quarterback playing great football. And traditionally in the NFL, when you've got one of those in the playoffs, you've always got a shot. When Eli Manning got hot, he took the Giants to 2 Super Bowl victories. When Joe Flacco got hot, he took the Baltimore Ravens to a Super Bowl victory. When you've got a top-level quarterback, you've always got a chance. You can go out and beat a Pat Mahomes. You can beat a Joe Burrow. You can beat a Josh Allen if you've got the guy. And the Texans have that guy.
So kind of to shift gears here, because you kind of, you raised a point there. The team with the better quarterback usually wins. So are you saying Jordan Love is a better quarterback than Dak Prescott?
I mean, he certainly played like it this weekend, didn't he? Didn't turn the ball over, made great reads. I don't know. I think it's tough to – I said typically, but, I'm not a Dak Prescott truther. Maybe I am a truther in the fact that I don't believe he's a great quarterback. So, I think it's still too early to tell on Jordan Love, considering most of his receiving core is banged up all year. So I don't think we got a real good look at him till late in the season of like what he could be. But I liked what I saw this weekend. I like seeing the Cowboys get that ass beat. That's for sure.
Well, yeah, and you're a lot closer to this situation than I am. I'm sure the media up there is just.
Oh, the venom is out, my guy. He people want him out of town.
Well, what he reminds me of, honestly, is he reminds me of Warren Moon. I grew up. My football, childhood was mid '80s to mid '90s. The Houston Oilers made the playoffs 7 years in a row. And 7 years in a row, they failed to make it to the AFC Championship game. And Warren Moon was the quarterback every one of those years. And every one of those years, he was one of the best regular season quarterbacks in football. And every one of those years, we may have won a wild card game, or we just advanced to the division championship game, title game and lose. Now, what I'll say about Dak Prescott is at this point in his career, I don't think you can blame all those losses on him. I don't know how many of those losses you can blame on him. But the fact is, with him at the helm, you haven't made it to the NFC Championship game. And, results matter in this league. Now, when you look at the game, I would say probably if you were to go with preponderance of the evidence, the defense is the one that failed in that game. I mean, they were making this point on national. I was able to watch some national, cable shows, and they were making the point that, in a couple of those touchdowns to Green Bay Packers, you had to draw the camera back wide before you could see a Dallas defender in the screen. I mean, it was just really awful. But he did throw 2 picks, and one of those was a pick 6. So last year against the 49ers, he throws 2 key picks. So at a certain point, you have to sit there and say, okay, this is not the guy. He's a year away from free agency. He's got a balloon payment on, I think, worth $55 million. If you keep him on the roster, does anybody want to trade for Dak Prescott at this point? I don't know. You might be stuck with him. Not you, but Dallas Cowboy fans.
Yeah, I mean, that was obviously the defense is a big problem in Dallas because realistically, I mean, Dak put up numbers, but he always puts up garbage time numbers in the playoffs, right? That game was 27-0. That game was over the minute that they fell behind 27-0. And then at that point, Dak started to, get some garbage yards, get a touchdown, and it got a little close late. But the defense didn't give him a chance. The defense gave him absolutely no chance. You're right. There were so many busted coverages in that game, poor tackling. The running back had an absolute field day. Aaron Jones had a field day. And it was just, there were two teams that I feel like showed up unready to play football, just not ready to play football this weekend, and both from the NFC East. The Eagles didn't look ready to play, and neither did the Cowboys. And, at least the Eagles could say they were on the road, but the Cowboys had a home game, home crowd. You had the playoffs laid out for you in as best a possible way, right? You had another guaranteed to host at least one more playoff game after this, and then a rematch theoretically with the 49ers for the Super Bowl. And you shit the bed at an unbelievably high level. I mean, McCarthy's got to go. McCarthy's absolutely got to go. Dan Quinn's got to go. And I said, I don't want to be the I told you so guy or anything like that. But when I was here and when they hired Mike McCarthy, I said it was a bad call. You had Aaron Rodgers for 7-8 years or whatever it was, and you went to one fucking Super Bowl. You had the best quarterback on the planet, and you went to one Super Bowl. Now I get that roster could have been better, but look at the Mike McCarthy teams, and they're not prepared. Their offensive game plan is terrible, and it's backyard bullshit football that's fun in the regular season. But when you've got a real defensive coordinator out there, or you've got legit playmakers in the secondary, you're done. You're absolutely done.
Well, so a few things to address kind of a few things of what you said. Number one, I think McCarthy coaches his team like he's Oklahoma going against Arkansas P&Q. And he said it when he was hired. He lied about the fact that he had watched a bunch of game film for the Cowboys. And he openly admitted, I didn't watch any game film. This is a guy, and they said it back when he was in Green Bay, like he would get a massage on Friday. When other coaches are sitting there crunching film and trying to figure out, this is how. And that's where we talked about what DeMeco Ryans did. DeMeco Ryans, what he absolutely did is he looked at what happened when we played Cleveland last time. What adjustments can I make to make this turn out differently? He didn't just sit there and go, well, I've got C.J. Stroud back, so I'm obviously going to win. No, he made defensive adjustments because he knew he had to. McCarthy went out there and just sat there and said, I've got the best offense in football, which statistically they did. And we've got a top 5 defense. And one of the comments that I made in the chat line with the other people on our site, I said, that sound is you hear the clicking sound that you hear is 5 administrative assistants canceling interviews with Dan Quinn. We don't need you to come in. That's okay. We'll go in another direction. All right. So let's say you are Bill Belichick, you are Jim Harbaugh, or you're Mike Vrabel, which seem to be like the top 3 coaching candidates right now. Maybe Pete Carroll. Maybe he gets another look. You've got a choice between the Eagles and the Cowboys. Which one are you taking to be the head coach of?
Eagles, right? I think that's a pretty easy choice to me. I still think Jalen Hurts is a winner. I think that he's been misused, and you've got a GM, I think at least that has a vision up there in Howie Roseman, right? Like I think that you have a guy that does a good job, drafts linemen well, drafts well in general, right? You're going to get a restock cupboard. You're going to get a guy who wants to win, and yeah, it's a tough fan base, but they do reward winning, right? Like the Philadelphia Eagles fan base loves their winners. You're obviously going to have a big hole with Kelsey announcing his retirement, but at the same time, there's a lot of good pieces in place in Philadelphia, and I feel like you can go in there and have some pretty immediate success. To me, I think it's real coach dependent though, because I think maybe I'm crazy, but I think Vrabel and Dak is actually a pretty good match, Scott. When you look at what he was able to get out of Ryan Tannehill, I think you and I can at least both agree that Dak Prescott is a better quarterback than Ryan Tannehill. So I think what he was able to do with Tannehill as his quarterback in their best season and relying on the ground game, I do think that is probably the best option for the Cowboys. I think wanting Belichick to come in here is the wrong call. At the end of the day, I think Belichick is washed. I really, really do. I think, there was a time when Bill Belichick was an elite defensive mind, and you paired him with Tom Brady, and between those two, the game planning was unbelievably spectacular. But I think that Bill Belichick has had too many yes men for too long, and you saw it. Once Tom Brady left, obviously there's going to be a drop-off, but you've got Matt Patricia coaching a rookie quarterback as an offensive coordinator, and he's a defensive coach, and then you've got an offensive line coach as the other. Like the decision making from Bill Belichick was just a middle finger to everybody, saying that I know what I'm doing and nobody else does. So I think if I'm Dallas, that combination of him and Jerry Jones would be fucking toxic as shit. So I think Dallas needs to look at someone like Mike Vrabel, looking at, hey, look what he did with Ryan Tannehill. Maybe we could get something similar going on there.
That would be a fun team to cover, though.
Bill Belichick-led Cowboys?
Well, and so here's what I would do if I'm with Bill Belichick if I'm the team, right? And this is any team. Number one, you aren't the GM. You have shown over the last 10 years you couldn't put a roster together with a roadmap and a flashlight. Number two, you can't pick offensive coordinators. We're going to pick one for you, and you're going to run whatever offense that guy wants to run. If you do those two things, I think Bill Belichick can still coach in this league, because I think Bill Belichick teams are generally well prepared. They don't do stupid stuff, and he's still a good defensive coach. Like if you look at the Patriots, they were competing on defense. Their offense was just absolutely so god awful. They couldn't do anything, with that offense. And I think when they showed up a graphic over the weekend, they had 4 quarterbacks with the top interception ratings. 2 of the 4 quarterbacks were Patriot quarterbacks, Mac Jones and Zappy. So that's just an.
But I guess the question to that though is, if you're Bill Belichick and you're meeting with Jerry Jones and he says, "I want you to coach, but I'm going to hire a GM, and I'm going to pick your offensive coordinator." If you're Bill Belichick, why would you take that job?
That's true. And he's already been interviewed by the Falcons. We know that. I would not pick Bill Belichick. because I don't know much longer he's going to do it. I think if he has 2 reasonable seasons, he's going to break Don Shula's record, for victories. So I don't know if he coaches much beyond 2 years. And if I'm, picking a head coach, I don't want to pick a guy that's going to be out the door in 2 years. I want to pick somebody who, at least if I want to keep him there, is going to stay there. So that kind of goes down there between the other 3 guys of Pete Carroll, Mike Vrabel, and Jim Harbaugh. I don't know. I think Vrabel's a good fit for that situation. Pete Carroll might oddly be. I don't know. That team needs discipline. With the Eagles, I want to know what happened with Nick Sirianni. I want to know, did those guys quit on him? Or was that just a case of football malpractice? Because football malpractice, you can fix that overnight. You can fix that with a guy that knows what he's doing. But if you have a roster that has some toxic guys on it, I don't know. I mean, that's kind of a tough, that team, I don't think, even comparing them, the 2 performances, comparing the Cowboys' performance with the Eagles' performance, I have never seen a team play that disinterested or just open up a huge whole case of quit like that Eagles team did on Monday night. I don't know about you.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. That to have that as your playoff game, like even the teams that were outgunned, the fucking Steelers gave you a better effort on Monday afternoon than the Eagles did on Monday night, right? And they have every one of their starting players healthy. They've got their litany of weapons. They're loaded at wide receiver. They're loaded at running back. They're stacked on the offensive line. One of the problems I see, I think there's a combination of football malpractice, right? You lost your offensive coordinator and your defensive coordinator off the Super Bowl team last year to the Colts and to the Cardinals, respectively. Then you bring in a name we just mentioned, Matt Patricia, is calling the defense for the Philadelphia Eagles. The guy's been a fucking cancer everywhere. I mean, look, the players quit on him in Detroit. He was terrible there. I don't know. I mean, you've got new offensive coordinators coming in for Jalen Hurts who just misused him. Really, really misused that guy. To me, it's almost like they went and watched the RG3 tapes, and instead of learning what not to do, they were like, hey, I think we found something here. Hey, if we just keep running this quarterback, no one will ever figure it out. They'll think we're going to hand it off, but he doesn't. He just keeps it. And at some point, Scott, what happens? Why are running backs a dime a dozen in this league? Because they take a shit ton of hits and they're out of the league fast. That's why no one pays running backs. And that is why you don't run your franchise quarterback who you just gave an extension to into the ground. You protect him. If he needs to scramble to get out of there, go for it. But you don't call 10 designed quarterback runs a game for your barely 6-foot quarterback. He's undersized at the position, and they still run him like he's Mike fucking Vick out there.
Well, and Mike Vick didn't last very long in the league either, when you think about it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, he missed a good chunk of the middle of the career, but...
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Well, but Nick Sirianni, he was an offensive mind. What I don't get is that, yeah, you lose your offensive coordinator, but so let's say that some team were to all of a sudden hire Matt Burke as their head coach. Are the Texans skipping a beat without Matt Burke? No, because DeMeco Ryans is a former defensive coordinator himself. He's the one actually calling the defense. Now, is Matt Burke helping? Sure, I think he's helping. But Nick Sirianni just seems to be like he's like just some bros walking along the sideline thinking his assistants are going to do everything for him. Then, what are you doing? Why do I want you? Now, obviously, I think the Eagles are a better situation. Of course, we have to look at the caps. The caps of those two teams. Obviously, that matters. But yeah, the Eagles better situation because number one, their ownership. He isn't holding 2 press conferences a week. Jerry Jones, he cuts out the knees out of every head coach he's ever had. So I wouldn't want to be there unless I were to get some assurances like, yeah, it's you. You're the one making the decisions on Sunday, and we're going to make sure that the players are listening to you. So because to me, Harbaugh has his pick. He can go. He can go back to Michigan if he wants to. He's got a huge extension waiting for him if he does. So
yeah, I think Harbaugh's going to want an elite quarterback to work with. Harbaugh's going to want. I've heard some rumblings that he might go to the Chargers. L.A. prime spot, has Justin Herbert, has some good pieces on offense, just constant underperformers. That makes a lot of sense to me. Harbaugh coming to the Dallas Cowboys makes absolutely zero sense to me because Harbaugh's not a guy who's going to take shit from Jerry Jones for very long. Look what happened in the 49ers situation. He ran himself out of town because he wouldn't shut up. He'd go in and tell people exactly what he thought. And while he was winning, it was fine. But the moment they weren't winning, that big personality got run out of town. Well, Jerry Jones doesn't care if you're winning or not. He'll run you out of town, period. He doesn't want that kind of shit in his house. For better or for worse, right? I'm not saying he's correct in that, but that's just who Jerry Jones is. He is the face of the Dallas Cowboys. So you cannot have a coach like Jim Harbaugh who is a big personality. He just hired Mike McCarthy, Jason Garrett, Wade Phillips, all timid little bitches to be the head coach because he is the face of the team.
Hey, Wade Phillips, legend.
I love Wade.
He did.
But does Wade command attention at the microphone?
He did something in his introductory press conference I've never heard anybody do. He quoted Neil Diamond. Anybody that can quote Neil Diamond in an introductory. Now, his closing press conference was even better because he showed up late. And, he's like, what are you going to do, fire me? And, that was, absolutely, absolutely.
I enjoy the former Coug Wade Phillips as much as the next guy, Scott.
Oh,
but
no,
he's not a good NFL head coach.
Oh,
he has never been. He's a great defensive coordinator for 3 years. You get 3 good years with Wade Phillips, the second year being the best, the third year you're still okay, and then it's downhill from there.
Sure.
That's the Wade Phillips curve. First year, big improvement. Second year, dominant. Third year, step back. Fourth year, Wade Phillips is run out of town.
Yep.
Pretty much everywhere he goes.
Yep, that sounds about right.
So
and he's actually, and he's got a winning record as a head coach, so I wouldn't say he's awful. But yeah, he's not going to take you to and Jason Garrett was kind of the same way. Jason Garrett wasn't awful, but he wasn't going to take you where you needed to go.
Jason Garrett was the definition of 9-7.
Sure.
I think Jason Garrett would take 12-4 rosters and turn them into 9-7 teams.
He's basically the Jimmy Williams of the NFL. If you want to make a comparison. Jimmy Williams spent his entire career coming in second place. Hey, nothing wrong with second place. Second place is better than third, fourth, fifth, or sixth. But he was never first. And he had first place rosters in 3 different locations and somehow managed to turn them into second place teams.
I'm going to pitch you something here. Because I think the trend right now in the NFL, Scott, is passionate former player for head coach, right? I think that is kind of where things are going. At least young, energetic head coaches are the ones that are really having a lot of success. You look at D'Amico Ryans, you look at Mike McDaniels in Miami, the younger guy. So let's say it is Vrabel in Dallas. What would your thoughts be on Tony Romo coming out of the booth and being the offensive coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys? Clearly knows the game. He's aware of the trends that are going. Can call a game at a high level. I think you need somebody like that to come back for Dallas to try and help Dak or to try and get him to that next level.
I'll tell you what I would do to piggyback on that. I would be all in favor of that. I would make Chris Collinsworth a wide receivers coach. And maybe,
I'm not trying to get rid of all the broadcasters you don't like, Scott.
Maybe Joe Buck, could come.
And he could be the communications director for the team as well if you're looking for somebody.
Exactly. If Tony would, I think he knows the game, and so it's just a question of what he wants to do. I think he likes the lifestyle that he has. I don't think it's pretty clear he doesn't prepare a whole lot.
He's getting in trouble with that, actually.
Exactly. So, I mean, that's the problem with, and that's the thing with coaching, because I immediately when Michael Brantley announced his retirement from Major League Baseball, my dad immediately calls him on the phone, hire him as a hitting coach, and it's like, yeah, I don't know if that's what he wants to do though, and so
Right.
that's kind of the same thing with Tony Romo. I think Mike Vrabel would fit in Dallas. And I think if Jerry were to let him coach, I think he's a guy that gets more of what, I mean, he's gotten more out of some bad rosters than just about anybody. You can't look at Tennessee's rosters over the last 5 years and outside of Derrick Henry say, like, I can find you 5 good football players on that team. I don't think you could. I dare you. Especially before, you brought in DeAndre Hopkins to that team. I mean, okay, outside of DeAndre Hopkins and Derrick Henry, who is one guy off that team that you know and is a really good football player?
Is Kenny Bynard still on the team? The safety?
No, I think he went to the Eagles, actually. They got traded him to the Eagles.
Okay. Got nothing.
Exactly. So to me, if you were to give him a talented roster, which Dallas
Keith
has,
Bullock still there?
I
think he's retired.
don't know. I couldn't tell you. Yeah. We know that Frank Wycheck's not there, unfortunately. So, yeah, I don't know. Hold on a second. I'm going to pass it over to you. I need to plug my computer in here.
But no, I do think you're right. I think you've got to have somebody that can work with Jerry there. It's going to be a tough place to fill, but I do think the Eagles are the better job. But let's move on to the other playoff game that we saw is the Bills and Steelers. I think we all had that one going exactly that way. I think it was even closer maybe than I think a lot of us thought it would be. The Steelers gave it the best fight that they possibly could. But at the end of the day, I think, Scott, you and I both know that that game was never going to be close. The Steelers had absolutely no chance in that football game. And they had no business being in the playoffs with Mason Rudolph coming in at quarterback. It's ridiculous to think that you're going to go into a playoff game with Mason Rudolph and make any noise. I get you have a good defense. I get it was a snow game, yada, yada, yada. Again, better quarterback won. I think the only thing to discuss out of that game is what are your thoughts on the Josh Allen fake slide versus, when he does slide and he gets hit late? Is that kind of what he gets for something like that? Or is that something that, to me, when you look at, we need to get rid of the brotherly shove for players' health and safety, faking a slide as a quarterback is about as dangerous as we can get, because you're setting up exactly what happened, which is the quarterback to take a big shot later because maybe he's faking again, and then this time he slides and he gets popped.
First of all, kind of getting to the elephant in the room, Mike Tomlin is a guy that has only 1 year on his contract. If you had an existing opening, where would he rank amongst all the guys that are available, number one? And number two, I absolutely agree. They were outgunned. I mean, I don't think there was any way they were going to win that football game unless, Josh Allen crapped the bed. I think the NFL in general needs to spend a lot of time on the way they officiate football games. And that whole thing is a microcosm of one of the problems is that you're looking at, legislating intent. So when you get a defender that hits a quarterback, okay, is he intending to injure him? I don't know. A lot of these calls where they call, roughing the passer because you're hitting them too high or too low, where do you want to hit them? And then when the quarterback's going down, then, if I'm, running full speed from 10 yards away to tackle a quarterback, then all of a sudden the last second he looks like he's going down, how do you expect me to adjust my angle if I'm going full speed? It doesn't make any sense. So I think the league, I don't know what the answer is there. I don't know if you want to sit there, because then you're going to start legislating intent on the quarterback side. Is he intending to fake a slide, or is he just doing a juke? But I think the league has to look at officiating overall. It's been egregiously bad this year.
I couldn't agree with you more. It's that game, I think, particularly brought it to light with that play. We saw it with Kenny Pickett in college, too. He did the same thing when he was at Pitt. I know that wasn't Kenny Pickett there, but still, it's just you're opening yourself up to dangerous plays, to guys that are getting hurt. Even on the defensive side, when you pull up, okay, I'm pulling up, I'm not going to hit him, and all of a sudden an offensive lineman lays your ass out because you pulled up. That's not cool, So I don't know how you say you can't fake slide, but at the end of the day, that's definitely something that maybe devious or unwritten rule, whatever you want to call it. Josh Allen got lit up later because of it. So, you're only bringing it on yourself. And what happens if Josh Allen gets hurt there? Then everybody's going to call that player a dirty player, and that was a cheap shot. When in actuality, again, Josh Allen brought it on himself by faking the slide early in the game and then coming back later and actually hesitating and then sliding. You just set yourself up for a bad situation. So, long story short, it was a bad game. Even though it was a one-score game at one point, it really wasn't close. I'm intrigued to see what the Steelers do at quarterback, because I think you and I both probably feel like Kenny Pickett's not the answer. Mason Rudolph is not the answer. And here's where the Steelers' problem has been, because Mike Tomlin is such a good head coach. This team doesn't bottom out, right? It's kind of the same thing that happened with the Rockets in between T-Mac and Yao and James Harden. When you keep going 500 every year, you don't get high enough in the draft to go get that next franchise player that's going to change the landscape of your franchise. So at some point, you have to do what the Rockets did and make a trade. You either have to trade and go get that guy, or you have to trade and go get up higher in the draft so you can go get your guy. But at the end of the day, when you go 9-8 or 8-8 and you don't ever have a losing record the way Mike Tomlin does, it's a testament to him as a football coach. But when you need a quarterback, unless you're just in one of those sensational quarterback draft years where you have the year like the last time they got their quarterback, and Ben Roethlisberger, who fell to them late in the draft, that doesn't happen very often, right? So more than likely, you're going to have to move up and go get your guy. And at least to this point, we've seen they haven't done that. They've hoped that second-round guys or late first-round picks like Pickett, or a second or third-round guy like Mason Rudolph or Landry Jones, who they've tried in the past. They had all sorts of guys that they thought maybe we can get lucky late, and they never did. You're going to have to move up in the draft. You're going to have to spend in free agency, one of the two, to really make a move if you're the Steelers, because you can build up every other aspect of your team as good as you can. But if you're rolling Mason Rudolph or Kenny Pickett out again next season, you're not going to win that division. And if you win a wild card spot, you're not winning a wild card game.
No, and I like Mason Rudolph a lot, but I like him as a backup.
He's a fine backup.
Yeah, he's a backup quarterback. He's a guy that if the Steelers were to, he's a free agent, so the Steelers would sit there and say, I'm not signing him. He's a guy I'd look to back up C.J. Stroud, because he's a guy that
won his final 4 games of the season to get you into the playoffs.
Exactly. So he's a guy that could, if Stroud has another concussion or something like that, and you need a guy to roll out there for a game. So looking at the other 3 divisional games, obviously the Bills and the Chiefs is the headliner. And it seems like we see this game every year. Does this game turn out differently in Buffalo than it has in Kansas City?
I think there's definitely a chance it does, Scott, and it's for 2 reasons. Number one, this is a different Kansas City Chiefs team. I don't think Travis Kelce is the same Travis Kelce he's been in years past, and I also think it has nothing to do with anything that happens off the field. I think Father Time is undefeated, and Travis Kelce is just the hair bit slower. He's not as electric as he was. He's still fantastic. He's still one of the best tight ends in the league. But now he is one of the best, right? And I think for such a long time he was night and day above everybody else, and you just couldn't stop this guy. Now I think it's a little bit easier to take him out of the game, just a little bit. Not impossible. It's not like, okay, we'll shut down Travis Kelce, but I do think it's something that you can focus more attention to because the lack of weapons around him. Now, the young receiver Rice had a touchdown this week. He's starting to grow. He's still a rookie, and so you're asking him to go into a hostile environment in the playoffs and potentially make big plays for you. But other than that, Martez Valdez-Scantling doesn't scare me. Tony drops everything. It doesn't scare me. Pacheco's a nice player, does a good job. If you get him in space, he's really, really dangerous. But other than that, if we can find a way as a team to eliminate Travis Kelce, okay, now you got a chance to go win this football game, and it's just a little bit easier than it's been in years past. So for that reason, plus I do think being at home, Josh Allen's on a heater right now, playing great football. I think they did a nice job of getting Diggs the ball early in the football game this week to get him into the flow of the game. I think so many times in the playoffs, he gets into a long drought without a catch in a game, and he gets pissed and he gets frustrated, and him and the quarterback are arguing and yelling at each other at the sideline. He's an emotional competitor. He wants to win. When it's going in your direction, that's helpful. When it's negativity, it's bad. So if you can get him involved early in the game, on top of the things I mentioned with Kansas City, I think they could be in trouble. I don't think Buffalo wins, though. I really don't. I think it'll be closer. I think they have a chance. I do still think it'll be Kansas City.
I think what's sneaky about this Kansas City team is they have, at worst, the second best defense remaining in the playoffs. And that would mean that Baltimore would have the best defense. And somebody, pointed this out, that a lot of people are waiting for Kansas City to win a shootout. They've allowed 30 points in one game in the last 2 years. And that was in the Super Bowl last year. So it still comes down to Josh Allen. I think Josh Allen, when you look at the playoff numbers, he's got terrific playoff numbers. Absolutely terrific. Mahomes has just been a shade better. So,
and the thing with Josh Allen, too, though, it's what you said with Lamar Jackson. Just an untimely turnover late in the game or a stupid throw here or there.
Yes.
He is a more athletic Brett Favre, right? And when things are clicking and he's fitting throws in tight windows, everybody loves him. But sometimes those tight windows are just too tight, and Josh Allen still tries to force throws at really, really bad times.
Yeah. And I think that, and we talked about it, I think it's going to be the same thing as the Baltimore-Houston game. Whichever quarterback makes the key mistake is the one that loses the game. And when you're looking at Patrick Mahomes in one corner, Josh Allen in the other, I think we all know which quarterback that's likely to be. So there you go. I think the NFCs, I think the Packers are a terrific story. I don't think they have much of a chance to beat the 49ers. Detroit and Buccaneers could be an interesting game, I guess.
I think it's Detroit. I'm riding this Detroit team all the way, man. I love the Detroit Lions right now.
I want to see them make it to the NFC Championship game because it's just a terrific story for everybody that's been a Detroit fan. They put up on the graphic that if you're 65 years old coming into this last weekend, you've only seen Detroit win one playoff game. And I
have a 6-month-old daughter, Scott. I was her age the last time that the Lions won a playoff football game.
Well, the reason why they put 65 and not 66 is because that NFL championship came back in 1957. And so that's why they did not put 66. So imagine if you're born in 1958 and you've only seen them win 2 playoff games up to this point. The Texans in their short history have won 5. As bad as people seem to think we have it, we're not that bad. In the playoffs, we're
from 2010 on. The Texans, I would argue, are the best team that the AFC South had.
Sure.
Or the best franchise, right? We had more division titles than anybody else. We won every time we've been in the playoffs. We've won a playoff game. We've never been a one and done in the playoffs.
No, we had one time where we lost to the Colts with Deshaun Watson.
That's right. First round of the Colts. That was Deshaun's first playoff game. But other than that, Even with Brock freaking Osweiler, we won a playoff game. That was against a shitty Raiders team at home with their third string quarterback. But still, the Texans showed up and they won their playoff games.
Yeah, definitely since Peyton Manning retired. We've been the class of the AFC South. That's definitely true. The Jaguars have been absolutely terrible. I think they've made it to the playoffs, twice?
They had the Blake Bortles run.
And then that was when we
made it last year.
That was when we made it last year, and that's it, really. So before we get to the favorite portion of the week, we do have to bring up a bit of bad news that both of us simultaneously sent text to each other this morning. And this one came out of the blue. Kendall Gravemen, I don't know what you would consider him as far as his role on the team, what it was likely to be. Maybe sixth inning guy, maybe
seventh inning, probably.
Out for the season with shoulder surgery. We didn't even know that his shoulder was jacked up. So, number one, does this change your idea at all about who the Astros are in terms of the pecking order in the AL West? And number two, while Dana Brown said this didn't create more urgency to sign relief pitching, does this, in your mind, create more urgency to resign relief pitching?
Absolutely. Absolutely it does. I'll start with that, yes. And it's come out, Michael Schaub is a guy that I follow and have tweeted back and forth with a few times on X. He said that the Astros are in talks with Neris, and their sticking point right now is over a third year. So I think getting Neris back would be fantastic. And maybe, just possibly, this could be a blessing in disguise. Because I am not a huge Kendall Gravemen believer, Scott. I think he's okay, but every time that the Astros have gone and got him, he's leaked oil down the stretch. He's been fantastic where he was, and then he was just good with Houston. You look at the run that they made in 21 with him on the team. He let up some key runs in the playoffs. Wasn't as nails as he was with the Mariners before he got to Houston. And you could say the same thing about once he got here last year with, he had a nice season going with the White Sox, and he wasn't bad with Houston, but there's a difference in a guy who's got a 2.5 ERA and a guy who's got a 3.3 ERA. That's a difference, Scott. And it's one's elite and one's good. And we made a trade for an elite reliever, and we got back a good reliever. So if you could now go sign an elite reliever who gives you elite performance, the only negative here is that $7 million still counts against the cap from Gravemen. Other than that, you have a chance to maybe improve your roster a little bit and be better than you actually were if you go get Neris and he performs like he did last year. A couple big ifs, but there's a chance that this could be maybe even a chance to save the Astros from themselves here.
I'll push back a little bit. Just looking at the numbers, his ERA with Houston was under 3 this past year. His ERA with the White Sox was like 3.5. I think his ERA, I want to say, was 2.42 in Houston. Now, I'll say this. It was not a pretty 2.42. There were, lots of games where he got out without any runs, and you're like, how in the hell did that happen? And I think I would agree with you that coming into this year, he is not a guy that I would want pitching in the 8th inning. He's a guy that you would want in the 6th or 7th inning. Neris is another guy that I think if you look at like StatCast, I don't know if you look at StatCast at all, but his overall numbers were much better than what his StatCast numbers were. And so he's a guy that I think the decision not to sign him initially was a good one. And I think that now that the calendar has flipped to January and we're getting closer to February, that maybe that price is going to come back down to where it should be. I would not give him a third year. I might give him 2 years with a team option, but I wouldn't give him a third year. Stevenson.
And real quick, you were right about 2023. He was 2.42 with Houston, 3.48 with Seattle. I'm sorry, with Chicago. The thing that I was thinking about actually was the walks. He was not effective He had 16 walks in 23 games with Houston, where he had 20 walks in 45 games with Chicago. And the one that I was really thinking about, in 2021, he was .82 as his ERA in 30 games with Seattle. Comes to Houston, he's 3.13 in 23 games. So he went from elite to good, at least in 2021.
No, if you look at the StatCast numbers for that year too, he was way overperforming in Seattle. And so that's kind of the same. And I think in a very similar way to what Neris did this last year. If you look at Neris's numbers, he shouldn't have been anywhere near what he was. And so that's just one of those things where, I think looking at analytics matters. Stevenson is a guy we've been in on. I wouldn't mind getting both Neris and Stevenson now that you have no Gravemen. He's a guy that was traded. He was with the Pirates. He got traded to the Rays, and his numbers with the Rays are really pretty good. And then the other guys that you have on your list, David Robertson's a guy. If he wants to continue pitching, he's a guy that could be a seventh inning guy. I don't know that I want to touch Aroldis Chapman unless you want him to pitch batting practice.
Although realistically, Scott, he's pretty good against everybody but Jose Altuve and the Astros. So if you don't have to face Jose Altuve and the Astros, is he he's back to being Hall of Fame level stuff?
It's like your reverse Mark Portugal all over again.
I don't want him though. Let me preface. I do not want Aroldis Chapman on this team.
If you want to do a deep dive baseball reference, look up Mark Portugal's numbers, and then look up what he did against the Giants. And then if you look at the Giants ended up signing him to this huge contract, and he did jack shit because that's the only team he beat was the Giants. So that would Aroldis Chapman would be a reverse Mark Portugal. But I think getting two relievers, and we're about $1 million or $2 million underneath the tax threshold, just to kind of to set the bar here. But Dana Brown did come out today and say that there is room in the budget for another relief pitcher. He didn't say how much, but he said there's room. I think you need to sign one, at least one, because the problem is now if you go in with the roster as it stands now, Rafael Montero is your seventh inning guy. How are you feeling about that?
Good, not great. I think Montero's gonna have a bounce back year. I don't think he's gonna bounce back to what he did in 2022. He had a 2.37 that year. But I think he could be 2.85 again. I think, as we've talked about previously, relievers go good to bad, good to bad, good to bad a lot of times as they make adjustments. So I don't think he's gonna be untouchable, but I wouldn't be surprised if he had a high 2, low 3 ERA as a sixth or seventh inning guy. I don't want him in the eighth inning like he was in the 2022 playoff run. That's Brian Abreu's territory. Get out of there. But I do think that in the sixth or seventh inning, I'd be okay. I'd feel better if he's the sixth and Neris is the seventh, or if we could get a guy like Stevenson. He's got some nice numbers. I'm also a guy that we haven't talked about. They've mentioned that the legend that is Forrest Whitley is going to see some opportunity as a bullpen guy this year. Now, the guy who's had great stuff, can't ever stay healthy. I'd like to see what that looks like in spring training before I just hand someone like that the seventh inning. But maybe I'm wrong to have some high hopes, but I think this could be a great opportunity for him to finally make his contribution. The spot is open, right?
Well, you have Coleman, who I think would be your Ryan Stanek. I think that's kind of fitting his role. Where I would ideally like to see Montero is Montero's a guy that kind of showed that he can pitch in high leverage when he's doing well, but he pitched better in low leverage. So he's a guy that I kind of see kind of going up and down the board depending on how he's going. Whereas I see Neris, if you were able to bring him back, he's more of your firm, this is your seventh inning guy.
I think one of the things they're going to have to think about too, though, is as of right now, Maton's not coming back, right?
No.
So who's going to be the guy that you call to get you out of a jam? For Dusty, it was always Phil Maton. I don't know who that's going to be yet. I think that's a spot in the bullpen. It's not a seventh, eighth inning guy. There's a guy in the bullpen who's your jam guy. Who can you call to get you out of a jam to get to the next inning, and then we'll get the next guy out there. Maybe that's Neris. Maybe that's Montero. Could be an opportunity for one of those two guys to step into that type of role. If you're going to not, I don't want a rookie pitching out of the bullpen for the first time to be the jam guy, right? That's
No,
a guy.
no. What I would do, honestly, is that, and this is that you have to think multidimensionally, and you have to think in terms of a 6-month season. That's where I would put McCullers once he's healthy. What I would like to see is I would like to see Forrest Whitley be in extremely low leverage. I'd like to see him be the guy of, oh shit, our starter just got blown up for 5 runs in 3 innings. We need a guy to get us through into the 6th. I'd like to see Whitley be that guy. You have other guys that could serve that role. Brandon Belak seems to be like a crash test dummy you could, throw into that. I used to call them designated losers. The people that, when the game is lost, you just sit there and say, it's you, guy. You got to finish off. You got to save some arms. You got to have those guys. And so that's where I would throw Whitley. I don't trust Whitley with anything more than that. And if he can give you that, that's worth something. Whitley hadn't done jack for this organization in 5-6 years. So I'd be okay with that. But McCullers is a guy that I could see pitching in multiple roles like that, where he could be the guy.
I'd be worried about him coming in mid-innings with the history of injuries, especially arm issues and elbow issues and forearm issues that Lance McCullers has had. I feel like he's a guy who needs a little time to stretch, get warmed up, and should probably come in to start an inning versus coming in mid-innings.
Maybe so, but he's a guy that if you're thinking of, I need a rescue guy, I hope you don't need rescue guys multiple times in a row, because then you've got bigger problems than, what we're talking about. So he's a guy that I think you need to pitch him almost like Chris Davinsky, back in 2017, where he could give you 70, 80 innings, but maybe in 30 to 40 games, where, he's not pitching back-to-back days. Maybe you start him in an inning most of the time. I mean, I think that's what you would prefer. But Davinsky was really good for that role of giving you like 2 innings. And I think that McCullers could do that. But that would be obviously a June and July kind of thing. You would need something to tide you over until, and maybe that's a Coleman. I don't know.
All right. Sorry about that. Technical difficulties here of the Born on the Bayou podcast. But Scott, as you were saying, you could use McCullers Jr. like Davinsky. I agree with you there, where you can get more than 1 inning out of him. Come in a jam, finish the next inning that he pitches as well. And then maybe give him 2 days off in between his appearances, which is, I assume, what you were kind of getting into there.
Yeah. I think like 30 to 40 appearances, maybe 80 innings, something along those lines. Well, in a full season. Because obviously when he's pitching from July on, you don't want him pitching 30 games from that point. But maybe 15 or 20 games, from July on, maybe get you 30 to 40 innings. I mean, if it's high leverage, then you're getting something out of him.
Yeah, I think that could be effective. I think, even in the playoffs, that would be more valuable as well when you have more days off in between travel days and things like that, where you could pitch him in a game 1. He gets game 2 off, gets a day of rest in between game 3. Now it's available game 3 and game 5, gets a day off in between game 5 and game 6, things like that. So definitely opportunities there for the Astros to use McCullers once he comes back. Fingers crossed if he comes back, as he's now missed, two full seasons of baseball at this point.
Almost, yeah. He came back. I want to say he came back in August of 22.
Yeah. Pitched a little bit.
All right, so getting to that favorite portion of the week, So we started off with our tip of the caps, and I led off this one with a guy that will never make this list ever again. Anything remotely close to this list. But let me set this up here, folks.
Is it for someone for staying away?
It was for somebody putting a hex on a team that we don't like.
And he stayed away from our team.
Stayed away from our team. He came to Game 7 of the ALCS dressed in Astros gear, and we all know what happened. The Astros just absolutely went down in flames. Ted Cruz, who is an absolute human jinx, who I am guessing is lying down somewhere on a beach in Cancun right now, judging by the weather that we're having here in Texas. But he sent out a good luck tweet, or X, or whatever the hell they want to call it on that shitty little app these days, wishing the Cowboys luck on Sunday. And you and I both know what happened on Sunday. It wasn't anything that they wanted, but it was something we definitely wanted. So a tip of the cap to you, to Ted Cruz. Thank you for putting that hex on the Cowboys.
I'm going to stay on the same game, except I'm giving my tip of the cap to Jordan Love, right? First ever playoff start. You basically match, performance from C.J. Stroud the night before in his first playoff start. The only difference was 2 yards. C.J. threw for 2 more yards, but both had 2 touchdowns, perfect quarterback ratings. I'm sorry, 3 touchdowns. No, C.J. had 2 passing touchdowns. One to Nico and one to Dalton Schultz. Then we had rushing, 2 pick sixes, and some field goals in there as well. So either way, 2 touchdowns for both guys. But to come in, your first start, to kick that Cowboy ass, as Scott and I both mentioned, we love watching the Cowboys lose in the playoffs. It is almost as good as watching the Texans win, because and again, I live in the DFW Metroplex. I live 10 minutes from the Cowboys training facility in Frisco. This is the fire trucks in this town have Cowboys painted on the side of them. So this weekend, the only fires they were putting out were dumpster fires, and it was awesome. Love it. Tip of the cap to Jordan Love for showing up, for balling out in his first ever playoff start, and making Packers fan go, Aaron, who?
Yeah, my favorite scene is Skip Bayless showed a video of him throwing out all of his Cowboys gear. And I was like, oh, then this is just awesome. This is just absolutely awesome. Okay, so to the not so good folks, and I'm gonna point my finger at an industry, and I'm gonna send us back in time. So, were you a party of or familiar with the Blockbuster lawsuit?
I'm vaguely remembering the lawsuit in general. Was it to do with late fees?
It did, because basically what happened was I think they initially set it at midnight closing,
right,
and then moved it to noon without telling anybody. And so they were assessing people late fees. I think I got that correct. And I remember getting something in the mail saying you could join a party, to this lawsuit, and I was like, okay, whatever. The whole thing is that Blockbuster Video had a stranglehold on that entire industry until the industry changed. Until Netflix
and Hollywood Video came to town. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, exactly. Netflix, kind of became a thing, and Netflix kind of evolved, from, sending stuff in the mail to, having, of course, their own streaming, network and all this, that, and the other. And Netflix really has kind of been, they've been kind of blown out of the water on the whole streaming thing, themselves. But what happened to Blockbuster Video? I think there's one left somewhere in North America. I think I remember hearing that.
It's in Bend, Wyoming, I believe it is.
That actually tracks.
And I think even they went out of business recently. I think within the last year they went out of business, but they were the last one. People go and do you remember the smell that Blockbuster used to have when you walked in? Every Blockbuster smell.
Oh sure.
Exactly the same.
Oh, sure. We went to the one on Clear Lake City Boulevard. I don't know if you went to that same
Yeah,
one.
right there by Village Pizza and Sub, right there as
Which,
well. You get a pizza and a movie. You go in, you order your pizza, you go, you pick out your movie. By the time you're done with everything, your pizza's ready, and then you go home for pizza and movie night.
by the way, no more Village Pizza either.
I know it wasn't that good, to be honest with you. The
No, it
meatball
wasn't.
sub was okay.
No, it wasn't. We usually got shrimp. That was kind of a go-to during Lent. But
You could have gone. You should have gone just a little bit further down Clear Lake City and got a po' boy from the Cajun place that was right there.
we've been there. We've been there. Abe's. Yeah, that's a good
Yeah,
spot.
Apes does a nice. Apes does a nice po' boy.
So my scumbag for the week is going to go to just basically the cable / satellite / streaming industry, right? Because what did the NFL do? The NFL chose that we're going to have one playoff game only on Peacock. Now, I downloaded Peacock ways back because we wanted to be able to watch at least Sunday night football games. And so it was free when we downloaded. Honestly, I don't know if we're getting the free version or not. They never got our credit card, so I'm just going to assume that they don't charge us. But a lot of people paid $6 just to get that game.
And the app fucking crashed.
Yes. But, and I've described on the past my experiences with DirecTV. Back when we had DirecTV, they got our bill wrong 6 months in a row. And so I was spending an average of 30 minutes to 45 minutes on the phone with them every month, arguing over the bill. And that's when we finally decided to cut the cord as it was. And you have lots of other streaming services, and some of them are good and some of them are bad, but all of them include channels that you don't want. It's universal. And it's, all of them are, somewhere between $70 and $100, depending on what you get. And it's like the one that figures out, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to give you ESPN. I'm going to give you maybe ESPN2. I'm going to give you your regional sports network and maybe TNT and TBS whenever you want, like, NBA basketball. Boom. There are your channels. Pay us $30 a month. They'll make a killing. They'll make an absolute killing. And this whole streaming industry will die. Because, to be perfectly honest, like when we watch television, the way we digest television, we'll turn it on Hulu. We'll watch something old. We'll watch like maybe an old Gordon Ramsay, yells at some, poor kid in the kitchen. We'll watch the show like that. Or we'll watch, maybe there's like some shows on Netflix that, or some reality type TV, like the one that like they want to watch is Nailed It. I don't know if you've ever seen that show. So basically, put you or I in a kitchen and say, bake this complex cake. And then they at the end will go, nailed it. And it, of course, looks nothing like the cake that they want you to make. And so everybody's just kind of, but everybody's in on a joke. Like you don't have like the snooty chef that's sitting there yelling at you for the obvious mistake of putting in salt instead of sugar or whatever. They just gently sit there and say, like next time when you actually read the instructions, you might want to actually, follow the instructions and do this, that, and the other. They're gentle about it. They kind of laugh at you and they laugh with you. But that's the kind of programming we watch. So Hulu's what, $8-10 a month? So, I mean, it's maybe 15 now. Things are going up. So I know like, and that's the other part of it is that they keep raising the rates and it's like, but your programming is not getting any better for your streaming services. You're not getting more. They're just charging more. And yeah, some of that is old man, get off my lawn kind of thing. But the whole thing is somebody somewhere someday is going to offer 9 out of 10 sports fans what they want. And that is 5 or 6 channels, including their regional sports network and saying, okay, let's go.
Yeah, it's not far away from actually giving us what we want. We're not. It's just going to take somebody having the balls as a city to do it. And it's got to be Houston has a great opportunity to lead the way because the Rockets and Astros own their channel. And if they really wanted to, they could flip all the cable providers the bird and say, we're starting an app. Hey, advertisers, come with us. Same ad privileges. It's just going to be an app instead. And I think they do fantastic. But it's going to take like a small town team to do it first. Like, you know who would be a great one to do it would be like the San Antonio Spurs would be a great one because of the following that they have. If they said, you know what, we're just going to do an app. We feel like it's going to be more affordable for our fans and we want what's best for our fans. Or it can't be football, right? Because the NFL TV rights are too strong. But it's going to have to be a small market team. Maybe Milwaukee would be a good one where, you know, the Bucks and the Brewers could team up and do something like that. But if you can get enough NBA and MLB cities at least that have both teams to do something like that, then I think you can get those regional networks to win. I kind of like your all-encompassing idea. Like, hey, this is the sports app. Enter the teams that you like, and it's $35 a month or shit. It's $50 a month. But you've got every MLB, NFL, and NBA game. Done. Take my money. $50 a month for the whole year, but I can watch every sports game I want to watch. That's the only reason I have live streaming. Now I'm just down to, you know, regular Hulu, like you said, $15 a month. You know, how much is Fubo? $83 a month or whatever it is, so we could watch it even up from there, right? And I'm watching one thing on Fubo at a time, right? Like I'm either watching NBA basketball or Major League Baseball, but that's it. You know, if you know, depending on what TV of the house I'm in, I might put the football game on either Fubo or Hulu because we do have both based on how my wife set up her streaming before she met me, so she already had Hulu. But I pay, you know, I'm in a sharing situation with Fubo, and that's probably going to get eliminated too, because not only have they gone in and raised the price on all these things, they've made it so you can't share accounts anymore. Netflix charges extra to share an account. Hulu cut down on that. They're checking IP addresses. So it's making it tougher and tougher to be a fan, an out-of-town fan especially, or a cord-cutting fan. You're absolutely right. All these people are in it for the money, and none of them are in it for the fan experience, which is really, really frustrating because as fans, we want to be heard and we want to see our teams for less than $200 a month on cable.
See, in the NFL, and this is just a greed point from the NFL to put it onto Peacock, because the NFL has a built-in advantage. They have, you know, virtually all of their games, with the exception of Monday night and Thursday night, on national TV. On free TV. They can charge out the wazoo because everybody can get free TV. And, you know, the thing is that I can't speak for anybody else but ourselves, but both of our TVs are smart TVs. We could easily download an app onto the TV. Boom. There it is. You know, and we'll have access. So I think it's a lot. I liken it to Blockbuster because Blockbuster knew they had a stranglehold on the industry. They just weren't wise enough to realize that someday this gravy train's going to end. And when this gravy train's going to end, Blockbuster, you notice they tried to do what Netflix did, but you know, customers are like, "Fuck you." I mean, you took it to us, and we're not going to give you any time of day. So that's going to be the problem.
We had Blockbuster online at our house. My mom did not want Netflix. She had the Blockbuster mailed to our house. It was actually, if you had it at the time of the mailed DVD, Scott, it was pretty good because you could take the mailed DVD into Blockbuster. They'd mail it back for you and give you a free in-person DVD to trade for that mailed-in DVD. So, like, we got tons of movie rentals at that point because also my mom's Blockbuster online list was as bad a list of rentals as you could have. Like, 85% of it was straight to TV, straight to DVD bullshit. Like Bring It On, Lucky Charm #5 kind of bullshit. Like any Bring It On movie got ordered.
Oh my gosh. So the all-time worst, and I was telling my wife about this, and she was assuming that it was one of my college friends, but my uncle sends me 2 VHSs for my birthday. And, you know, at that point, he was one of the only people that was giving me birthday gifts. So I didn't say anything, but the 2 gifts, are you ready for this? Striking Distance, Have you even heard of that film? No. Bruce Willis as a boat cop, and Wayne's World 2. Those were the two films that he gave me.
Wayne's World 2 is pretty good.
Come on. That was rough. It was absolutely rough. Striking Distance was worse, though. Because, did you ever watch Murphy Brown? Do you remember the painter dude that was kind of, hanging around with Murphy Brown?
Maybe a little. I mean, honestly, my Murphy Brown, I think I remember it more through like the Seinfeld when Kramer gets on Murphy Brown than I do from like watching the show.
Well, he was kind of like your wacky sidekick.
Okay.
He was the villain in Striking Distance. And it was just like, I couldn't think of any worse casting. It was just awful. All right. I've taken up enough time. I've filibustered here on my scumbag. We got to turn it over to Tim and let him have a chance with his.
No, I think, first of all, you hit the nail on the head because I would have had the Peacock scenario as mine if you didn't go there, because I didn't get to watch a snap of that football game on, what was it, Sunday or Saturday night. I even had the login. I'm logged in. I could see it on my phone, but it would not load on the TV. So their thing was so overloaded that even if you paid the $6, you still couldn't even guarantee that you're going to watch the game. So bad job by the NFL. Really, really bad job. Especially when you had the ability, Scott, to like simulcast onto Peacock. There's no reason why the game couldn't have been on NBC and Peacock the way that the Texans game was. It was really, really dumb to do what they did if they were not going to be able to support the traffic. So I'll double down with you on that one. But for this week, my scumbag is going to be Frisco ISD. I don't know if you saw what the feels like temperatures were up here today, Scott, but with the temperature at like 16 and the feels like at negative 10, nearly every school district in the DFW area decided that they should close school today so that kids are not waiting for buses, walking to school, doing all these things in very dangerous temperatures, except Frisco ISD. Not only did they not cancel school, they had my wife out there directing frickin' carpool in this weather. Absolutely disgusting. And then you try and make a comment or two on the announcement, and everybody responds with, we're raising wimps. If you want the day off, you should just homeschool your kid. You're lazy. Just buy your kid a jacket. All these kind of things. Number one, I have a jacket. I have plenty of jackets. I live in Texas. None of my jackets are good enough to walk to school within 2 miles in the weather that we had this morning. Number two, I'm not growing every year. If I buy myself a jacket, that jacket's going to last 5 or 6 years. I know you have a high schooler now, Scott. You went through this. You have to buy new clothes every fucking year. So why am I going to buy a heavy winter coat when we live in Texas and we get a week of really, really bad weather, and when it's this bad, you're supposed to just stay inside. So I'm not going to buy that coat because my kid's not out playing in the snow like a Northeasterner or a Midwesterner, because we don't have that weather to justify that purchase. So for all these people to say, just layer up, just wear a coat. It's, we're not creating pansies. We're going to raise real men, yada, yada, yada. Safety first, man. I got a wife who's a teacher, and I got a daughter who's going to be going to school. There's no business to risk safety to either one of them. Schools should have been canceled like it was at every other district. You have bad weather days built in. You opened yourself up to a lawsuit. What happens if one of these kids gets frostbite when walking to school, Scott? What happens then? This is a terrible decision. Let's hope nothing bad happened. I didn't, I don't know if anything like that happened. But I do know there was ice on the road this morning. I do know that as I was driving home from daycare, picking my daughter up at 5 o'clock, there was still ice on the road.
I was going to ask about that because they canceled school pretty much universally down here. And we got into the 20s last night. I think and when we woke up this morning, it was like in the 20s, and I think it got up to like 30.
It was 12 this morning at like 9 o'clock in the morning.
Well, and so to me as a parent and as a school employee, the temperature is really not my concern. My concern is if you have any precipitation. then if you're talking about any kind of frozen surface on the road, school bus slides, crashes with, 30, 40, 60 kids on it.
It's
I mean,
that, but also think
that's
about this too. How many school buses have good heat?
no. And
And so
that's
when you've got a feels like,
no.
the feels like was -10 today. So you got kids on a school bus at -10. If you're the first kid who gets picked up on the route, it's probably an hour till you actually get to the school. You're sitting on a school bus at -10 feels like in probably maybe a sweatshirt and a hoodie if you layer it up, because that's what you have, right? Like that. There's no reason to have more than that if you live in Texas. You're just not prepared for it. So
No.
I don't think there's anything wrong with saying we value the safety of our students and our teachers, and for that reason, we're canceling school today. Because 90% of the districts up here did it. Frisco and Allen didn't. And for that reason, really more Frisco based on the reaction of the parents in that district. They are my scumbag.
So let me fill in parents or people that are listening to this, that may not have children and may not understand how the school calendar works. So traditionally, in most of your districts, you have 2 weather days that are built in. And what will end up happening is you'll end up trading, like maybe you have to come to school on Good Friday, whereas Good Friday may have been off, before. And so those days are primarily built in for hurricane days, because we're obviously here in the South. In the South, we're going to have more of those days. And these days, they'll actually call them snow days. That's actually, their title that they're given. And what's going to happen is that, for instance, if a hurricane were to come through and decimate Houston, the state will end up waiving the days. So, like, let's say we were out 2 weeks, because of a hurricane, which has happened. The state almost always waives those days. So it's not like they're going to make you go into school into June in order to make up those days. And so if you have a winter storm that you have once a year in Texas, and you have to stay out of school, let's say 3 days, the state's not going to make you make up that other day. They're not going to do that. So there's really no sense in putting anybody in danger, because here's what you have to think about as a school district. Okay, yes, buses are transporting kids within the district. So even if the roads in your district are safe, what percentage of your teachers are living outside of your zone? So, for instance, do y'all live in Frisco?
No, and that's what I was going to get to, because a majority of Frisco teachers cannot afford to live in Frisco, where the median home price is $715,000. How many teachers or families where one of the spouses is a teacher are buying $715,000 houses, Scott?
No, and so here's the deal. So if you're talking about, and how many high schools are we talking about in Frisco?
They have like 8 or 9 because they refuse to go above 3,000 students.
So you are talking thousands of teachers across the board between elementary, junior high, and high school. And if we were going to say 50% of those live outside the district, let's just go lowball it there. So you're talking probably at least 1,000 teachers that are driving in from outside of the district. And so
in 2002, there were 4,683 teachers, and then another 8,799 staff employees to go along with 67,000+ students that are all commuting for Frisco ISD.
So you're talking like probably out of employees, 3,000 to 4,000.
I'd say more than that.
Commuting.
If you've got 4,600 teachers and 8,800 staff.
Yeah, I'm saying if you have half,
8,000.
I'm saying if you had half that are being, that are coming in from outside the district, let's just say we're going to lowball it.
And that's a very low ball, Scott. I'd say it's closer to 60 to 70% in this particular district.
So you're putting, and our principal will do it all the time. He'll sit there and go like, make sure y'all vote in the school board elections. And I'm like, I don't live in the district. So, I can't vote in the school board election. Sorry. I'd love to, but that's not where we're at. So you have to, as a district, you can't only think of the kids living in your district. You have to consider all of your employees and where are your employees coming from. And if your employees are coming from areas that have more icy conditions than the areas maybe within your own school district, you can't in good conscience ask your employees to drive to work in those conditions. It's just, it's foolish. I mean, you mentioned lawsuits. Could you imagine? I mean, what are the odds of one, and you said, we'll say 6,000 employees. What are the odds that one of those 6,000 employees has a real horrible accident on an icy road coming into work?
Probably high. Probably
And
pretty high. Because let's add into it deflated tires, right? I had 17 psi in one of my tires today when I walked out. So let's add that into it. Icy conditions, not knowing how to drive in these icy conditions because you are living in Texas and most likely grew up in Texas. Add into it everyone else not knowing how to drive in these icy conditions, and then throw a 30-minute drive to work on top of it. I'd say there's pretty high likelihood that someone had an accident.
and so, now you're going to talk about risking lawsuits. And so that's
Sadly, we live in Texas, and that lawsuit would get thrown out immediately. But
well,
that's
no,
why they're scumbags.
Well, it wouldn't get thrown out, but they've limited it with tort reform. They've limited the amount of money that you can get in terms of damages. Our
I don't
governor
think a judge would hold Frisco ISD liable if a teacher sued them after being told you need to come to work and having a car accident because they'd say they were negligible on the road. I have no faith in the Texas court process, and they're scumbags for whole other reasons. But in this scenario, it's all around. I think Frisco missed a big opportunity. I called the district today to let them know. I said this was poor on y'all's part. Plano ISD closed, right? The neighboring district closed, just as big, if not a little bit smaller than Frisco ISD. But yeah, really, really disappointing. And the mitigating factors of the fact that Frisco is so expensive to live in that a majority of their teachers do have to drive in from elsewhere made it worse to me. And it's another opportunity in Texas for teachers to see that they are not cared about. And that's frustrating to me, Scott. It's what do I do with my kids if I have to go to work and there's a snow day? Like teachers aren't your babysitters. They are professionals, and their health and safety is just as important as anyone else's. And it is so frustrating to see the way that teachers are taken advantage of and are just expected to just do more than everybody else in society and still get slapped in the face at the same time.
absolutely, and I think this has been a good episode. Hopefully, Tim's going to have to do some work splicing this thing together, but hopefully, we'll be able to take care of some of those issues next week. I want to thank everybody for joining us on our second episode for the new podcast. Hopefully, we'll be talking about another Texans victory and the first trip in franchise history to the AFC Championship game.
I can't wait, Scott, but one way or the other, we will be talking Texans, Rockets, Astros on this podcast. We are born on the Bayou Sports. We are a Houston sports show for Houston sports fans. We will see you next week.